The market was alive with chaos, a swirling storm of light, sound, and color. Strange creatures of all shapes and sizes haggled, shouted, and bargained. Some had skin that shimmered like liquid. Others had multiple eyes that blinked in unison. And a few had limbs that twisted in ways humans could never imagine. The air smelled of spices, sweat, and something metallic that made the human nose flinch. It was a place where power ruled and fear was currency. Among the stalls, chained beneath a crude wooden sign that read, "Take as you wish," was a lone figure. She was unlike any other being in the market. Her skin glimmered faintly like starlight caught in water. Her hair flowed like a dark river, and her eyes, large, luminous, and fierce, burned with a mixture of defiance and despair. Yet despite her beauty, the chains bit into her wrists and ankles, holding her in place like a prize animal. She shifted slightly, each movement sending a small scrape of metal against the ground. Most of the shoppers didn't look twice. Some laughed and pointed. Others touched the chains casually, testing her for signs of weakness. Some whispered that she was beautiful, but not human enough to matter. A few turned away, embarrassed to face the cruelty that was normal here. Humans were rare in this place. They were considered weak, fragile creatures who could never survive the market's dangerous games. Most ignored her, and she had learned long ago not to hope for help. But one human, tall and steady, paused at the edge of the crowd. He was different from the others. His clothes were simple, worn from travel, his eyes clear and calm despite the chaos around him. He stopped, studying the chained woman not as an object, not as a commodity, but as a living being. His heart twisted at the sight. He could feel the fear radiating from her, the humiliation, the anger. He stepped closer, and something in her gaze met his. For the first time she felt seen, not as property, not as a spectacle, but as someone real. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. The question was gentle, almost human in its simplicity. The alien woman flinched, her instincts screaming to distrust him. No human had ever approached her here without malice, without a hidden agenda. Yet there was something different in his tone, something that told her he meant no harm. She blinked at him, her eyes wide, torn between fear and the faint glimmer of hope. The crowd swirled around them, loud and indifferent. Creatures shoved past, bartered loudly, and occasionally glanced at the scene with curiosity. Yet he did not flinch. He did not look away. Instead, he knelt down near her, close enough that she could hear his calm breathing, yet careful to give her space. He examined the chains. They were simple, rusty, and heavy, but not impossible. "You don't have to stay like this," he said quietly. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small tool, a lockpick of some kind. The alien woman tensed immediately, her hands tightening against the chains. "No human has ever done this before," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Why would you even try?" He gave her a small, patient smile. "Because I can't leave you here." The simple honesty of the words made something stir inside her. She had been left alone for so long, treated as if she had no value. Yet here was a human, a creature she had been taught to dismiss as weak, risking everything for her safety. She wanted to pull away, to scream, to refuse. But something she hadn't felt in a long time, kept her still. For the first time in the crowded, noisy, cruel market, a spark of hope lit inside her. The human knelt beside her, the market chaos fading into the background as he focused entirely on the chains that held her. Each link was heavy, rusted, and cruelly twisted to bite into her skin. He ran his fingers carefully over the metal, searching for weaknesses while the alien woman watched every movement, her chest rising and falling with nervous caution. She wanted to lash out to tell him to stop, but she didn't. There was something in his eyes, steady, patient, and unwavering, that made her hesitate. He pulled a small tool from his belt, a simple lockpick, and studied the padlock. It was old and worn, and he smiled faintly, almost to himself. "This isn't so bad," he whispered. His voice was quiet, calm and unthreatening, like a soft wind cutting through the clamor of the market. The alien's large eyes narrowed, suspicious. "You speak like it is easy," she said, her voice sharp but faintly trembling. "You don't know what happens to those who try." "I don't," he admitted. "But I know leaving you like this, that I can't do." The words hung in the air, simple but carrying a weight that surprised her. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. No one had ever said that her suffering mattered to them. She flinched slightly when he touched the lock, but there was no malice in his fingers, no desire to hurt her, just a careful, deliberate touch, moving with patience and determination. Around them, the market raged on. Creatures shouted, traders bargained loudly, and someone occasionally nudged too close, curious about the human kneeling beside the chained woman. Some laughed, some sneered, but he ignored them all. He focused only on her. And slowly, carefully, he began to work on the padlock. She swallowed hard. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the noise. "You could be anywhere. You could leave." He didn't answer at first. His hands worked steadily, nudging the lock here, turning it there. "Because someone has to," he said finally. "Someone has to care enough to try. Someone has to see you as more than this." He gestured toward the chains, toward the sign that proclaimed her as property. "And that someone is me." The alien woman's chest tightened. Her heart pounded, a mix of fear, disbelief, and a strange, fragile hope. No one had ever said words like that to her. Words that acknowledged her, not as a prize or an object, but as a living being. She wanted to look away, to tell herself that it was foolish to trust a human. But her eyes kept searching his, and something inside her softened. The lock clicked suddenly, faint, but unmistakable. The chains were still heavy, still cruel, but the barrier that had held her mind prisoner began to crumble. She stepped back instinctively, unsure what to do. He extended his hand gently, a silent offer, not as a master, not as a savior, but as an equal. "Come on," he said softly. "You don't have to stay here." For a moment she froze. The crowd pressed around them, the market's noise like a storm in her ears. She could still feel their eyes, their judgment, their expectation that she should remain chained, submissive, silent. But then she looked at his hand, steady, patient, honest, and she realized she had a choice for the first time in a long while. Slowly, carefully, she reached out. Her hand brushed his. A spark of warmth ran through her, subtle but profound. It was trust-forming, fragile and trembling, but real. He smiled faintly, and she noticed for the first time the determination etched into his face. He would not fail her. And in that moment, surrounded by chaos, cruelty, and the weight of years spent as property, she felt something she had thought lost forever: hope. The market may have been a place of danger and despair, but here, kneeling beside her, was a human who saw her as more than chains. He saw her as someone who deserved freedom, and for the first time, she believed that freedom was possible. The chains were free now, clattering softly as the alien woman stepped back, her wrists brushing against her sides. The human stayed kneeling for a moment, letting her adjust, letting her feel the weight of freedom for the first time in what felt like forever. Around them, the market roared and hummed with life, but it seemed distant, almost unreal, like a sound from another world. She could hardly believe that this human had done what no one else had dared. Her eyes, wide and luminous, met his again. She wanted to pull back, to tell herself this was a mistake. Humans were weak, fragile, and dangerous. She had learned that lesson the hard way, yet something in his calm gaze and the steady way he breathed made her pause. He wasn't looking at her like she was a prize. He wasn't sneering, judging, or testing her. He was looking at her like she was someone who mattered. She started, then stopped. Her throat felt tight, her voice fragile. She had been silent for so long, forced into quiet by chains and fear. Now words felt heavy yet necessary. Why did you help me?" He shrugged, but there was a softness in his eyes. "Because I could. Because no one else would. And because I don't think anyone should be left like this." She blinked, not expecting that answer. It was so simple, yet so powerful. She had been taught that the universe only cared about strength, that the weak were forgotten, that humans, especially humans, were insignificant in the vastness of space. Yet here he was, a human kneeling beside her, risking himself for someone he barely knew. For a moment she allowed herself to believe that maybe not all humans were weak. Maybe some could be stronger than the strongest traders, smarter than the cleverest predators, and braver than the most dangerous captors. This human, small, simple, fragile by every measure she had learned, was proof of something she had never imagined: that strength could come in quiet, unexpected forms. He stood slowly, offering her a hand. Not commanding, not demanding, just offering. "We should move. It's not safe here," he said, his voice calm but firm. She hesitated, the chains no longer holding her, yet fear still anchoring her in place. Her instincts screamed to run, to hide, to refuse. But then she looked at him. Really looked, and saw something she hadn't seen in years. Genuine care. Concern without motive. risk taken not for profit or fame, but because he chose to act. Slowly, cautiously, she placed her hand in his. Her fingers trembled as they met his, and a warmth spread through her chest. Trust, fragile and trembling, began to grow. The human smiled faintly, and she realized that in that simple gesture he had given her more than freedom from chains. He had given her the first hint of hope in a long, dark time. They moved together through the crowded alleys, careful to avoid the traders and creatures that might recognize her absence. She felt the market's eyes on her, some curious, some angry, some amused. Yet with his hand in hers, she felt a strength she hadn't felt in years. He was human, yes, but not weak, not here. Not now. As they slipped through shadows and corners, she began to speak in quiet fragments, telling him small pieces of her story. Her name was Lyra. She had been taken from her home, sold, displayed, and humiliated. She had been invisible to everyone, treated as less than life itself. Yet this human, he had seen her. He had acted, and in that act she began to feel something she had thought impossible. The faint stirrings of trust, and maybe even friendship. For the first time, she imagined a future where she could move without chains, where she could speak without fear, and where someone truly saw her as more than property. That future seemed fragile, uncertain, but with this human beside her it felt possible. And as the market raged on around them, she realized something deeper. This human wasn't just different. He was extraordinary. The market was still loud, a chaotic swirl of movement and sound, but Lyra felt a strange calm with the human by her side. His hand held hers firmly, guiding her through narrow alleys and hidden paths. Every step was careful, calculated, yet he moved as if he belonged here, as if he could navigate danger where no one else dared. She clung to his hand, her heart racing, not just with fear, but with a strange, thrilling hope. "Where are we going?" she asked softly, her voice barely audible over the distant shouts of the market. "Somewhere safe," he replied simply, glancing around. "Not far from here, but far enough that they won't follow easily." She nodded, trusting him despite herself. Trust was new, fragile, and dangerous, but she felt it anyway. Her life had been ruled by chains, fear, and control, and now she was learning something she had never known, that someone could care, could act, could fight for her without asking for anything in return. They ducked behind stalls, moved through narrow back streets, and avoided the guards who occasionally turned corners, shouting at creatures or inspecting goods. Lyra felt her chest tighten each time a shadow passed too close, each time a hand reached for a lock or a whip cracked in the distance. Yet he never faltered. He led her with quiet confidence, never looking back, never letting her doubt that he would protect her. As they ran, she began to speak in small fragments, telling him things she had never told anyone. Her name was Lyra, from a planet that no one here seemed to care about. She had been captured, sold, and displayed as entertainment. Each word was heavy, soaked in years of pain and humiliation. Yet he listened, patient and silent, never judging, never interrupting. For the first time she felt heard. "You're different," she said at last, her voice trembling. "No human has ever done this. No one has ever tried to save me." He smiled faintly. "Maybe we're supposed to be different," he said. "Maybe that's the point. We don't have to be cruel like everyone else." Lyra's chest tightened. He spoke simply, quietly, yet every word carried strength. He wasn't loud, he wasn't violent, but he had courage. He had determination. And in this strange, cruel market that made him more powerful than anyone else, the danger was not gone. Shouts echoed behind them. She could hear the frustrated cries of those who had expected her to remain their prize. She could hear footsteps approaching, quick and threatening. Fear gnawed at her again, sharp and sudden, but he gripped her hand tighter, and she felt a strength she hadn't felt in years. Together they were more than prey and predator. They were a team. They slipped into a narrow alley, dark and twisting. The walls pressed in and the air smelled of damp stone and smoke, but it was safer here. For the first time, Lyra allowed herself to breathe deeply, to feel a moment of relief. She looked at him, eyes wide, full of unspoken gratitude. You really care," she whispered. "I do," he replied, "and I'll keep caring until we're safe. I promise." She had never heard a promise like that. She had never believed that someone could care for her, truly care and not betray her. Her heart, so long hardened, felt a fragile warmth. She realized that her freedom was not just from chains, it was from the fear that had ruled her life. And he had given it to her. The market grew more distant behind them, the sounds fading as they moved through shadows. Yet danger was always near. Lyra knew that this escape was only the beginning, that the world beyond the alleys would not be easy. But with the human beside her, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Hope that she could be free. Hope that she could live. Hope that someone human, could see her as more than a prize, and as they ran, side by side, she realized that perhaps humans, weak and fragile in appearance, could be the strongest allies of all. They had reached a quieter part of the city, a place where shadows clung to the walls and the noise of the market faded to distant echoes. Lyra's legs ached and her wrists burned where the chains had bitten into her skin. She stumbled slightly and the human caught her arm, steadying her. She glanced up at him, her wide eyes full of fear and something else. Gratitude, confusion, and a fragile trust that she didn't yet fully understand. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice calm, patient. His hand lingered for a moment, not pressing, just offering support. I think so," she replied quietly, her voice trembling. She had been through so much, seen so much cruelty, that even a moment of kindness felt strange and almost unreal. "Why? Why did you help me? Humans, they are supposed to be weak. She stopped, unsure how to finish. "I'm not like that," he said simply. "Not all humans are weak, and not all of us ignore others in pain. I didn't like seeing you chained. Someone had to act, that's all." She studied him for a long moment, her mind racing. She had never imagined a being like him, human or not, would risk themselves for her. Most had ignored her, some had mocked her, many had seen her as nothing more than a prize. Yet he had chosen differently. That choice, small, simple, yet monumental, made her heart ache in a way she hadn't felt for years. They moved further into the abandoned streets, finding a small crumbling building that offered shelter. The human led her inside, and for the first time she felt a glimmer of relief. She collapsed onto the floor, her hands brushing over her now free wrists. The chains were gone, but the weight of fear, humiliation, and years of captivity lingered. He knelt beside her, offering water in a small container. She hesitated, distrust flickering in her eyes, but the exhaustion and thirst were stronger than her caution. She drank slowly, feeling the liquid soothe her dry throat. For the first time in what felt like forever, she felt safe. Not because the room was secure, but because he was here. "You didn't have to do this," she whispered, her voice small. "You could have left me there." "I could have," he admitted, meeting her gaze. "But I didn't, and I wouldn't. No one deserves to be treated like that. Not you, not anyone." Her chest tightened. The weight of his words, simple and unassuming, pressed against her heart. She had been treated as an object, as someone who didn't matter. And yet here was a human telling her otherwise. A human proving with action that she did matter. That someone could see her as more than a possession. Tears welled in her eyes, though she did not let them fall. She had been alone for so long that even hope felt dangerous. Yet this human, this fragile, ordinary-looking human, had given her something stronger than chains could ever break. Belief. Belief in kindness. Belief in courage. Belief in the possibility of freedom. He reached out, lightly touching her shoulder, not with possession, but with care. "You're stronger than you think," he said. "Even now, after everything, you're still here. You're still fighting, and I'll be here too. We'll get through this together." Lyra blinked, overwhelmed by a mixture of fear, gratitude, and something she didn't yet have words for. For the first time in her life, she felt that someone truly understood her. Not her alien strength or beauty, not her value as property, but her as a being with thoughts, feelings, and the right to live freely. A fragile warmth began to bloom in her chest, replacing the emptiness she had carried for years. The human beside her, quiet and determined, had not only freed her from the chains, they had given her hope, courage, and a spark of trust. And for the first time, Lyra dared to believe that perhaps the universe could be kinder than she had ever imagined. As the sun began to rise beyond the broken city walls, casting faint light into the room, she looked at him. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice almost trembling. He smiled quietly, humbly. "No need to thank me," he said. "Just stay with me and we'll figure the rest out together." For the first time, Lyra allowed herself to imagine a future where she could be free, where someone could care for her without fear, and where a human, small and fragile to the world, could be the strongest ally she had ever known. The sun had barely risen, casting pale light through the broken windows of the abandoned building. Lyra leaned against the wall, still trembling from the events of the night. Her wrists were free, her chains gone, but the fear lingered like a shadow she could not shake. Every creak of the old building, every distant shout from the city streets made her heart jump. She had tasted freedom, but danger was never far behind. The human stood beside her, calm and alert. His eyes scanned every alley, every street outside. He had not let his guard down, and his presence gave her a strange comfort. "We need to keep moving," he said softly, but with quiet urgency. "They won't stop looking for you." Lyra nodded, fear mixed with determination. She had been hunted all her life, first by the ones who captured her, then by those who treated her as nothing more than a prize. Now, for the first time, she wasn't running alone. She had someone beside her, a human who had defied every expectation, who had shown courage when everyone else had abandoned her. Outside, the market traders were stirring. Word had spread quickly that their prized captive was gone. Cries and shouts echoed through the streets, and distant footsteps approached. The hunters were relentless, fueled by anger and greed. Lyra's heart raced as she realized just how close danger had come. He grabbed her hand firmly. "Stay close. Don't look back. We face this together," he said, his voice steady, giving her the courage she didn't know she still had. She clenched his hand tightly, drawing strength from him, and for the first time she believed they could survive. They moved through shadowed alleys, narrow streets, and abandoned structures. The human guided her with confidence, anticipating dangers she couldn't yet see. Each corner brought a new risk: an approaching guard, a curious trader, the echo of footsteps. But he was always ready, always vigilant. Lyra realized something important. Humans might appear fragile, weak, and small, but this one was extraordinary. His courage was quiet, almost invisible, but unstoppable. Finally, they reached a secluded stairwell leading to a small rooftop overlooking the city. Lyra peered over the edge, her breath catching at the view. Below, the market sprawled like a chaotic beast, traders searching desperately, unaware that their prize was slipping further from their grasp. The city seemed endless, full of danger, but also full of possibilities. "We're not safe yet," he said, pulling her back gently from the edge. "But we're farther than they can reach right now." Lyra's chest tightened. Fear was still there, but it was mingled with something new: trust, courage, and gratitude. She realized that she had spent so long believing no one cared, no one would act, that survival meant hiding and obeying. But here, on this rooftop, she understood something she hadn't known before. Some beings, some humans, could defy expectation. They could rise above cruelty, greed, and fear. They could act with honor, strength, and compassion. "You're amazing," she whispered, voice soft but full of emotion. No one has ever risked themselves for me before." He smiled, a faint, humble smile. "You'd do the same for me," he replied simply. "Everyone deserves someone to fight for them." Her heart swelled, the warmth of hope growing stronger. She had never believed in allies, never believed in trust, never believed that anyone could see her as more than property. And yet here was proof standing beside her. Human, small in stature, ordinary in appearance, but extraordinary in every way that mattered. As the distant shouts faded and the city slowly returned to its routine chaos, Lyra realized that freedom was not just about running from chains, it was about being seen, being valued, and having someone willing to stand beside her in the face of danger. And she knew without doubt that with this human, she could survive anything the universe threw at them. For the first time, she allowed herself to hope not just for escape, but for a life worth living, a life where fear would no longer rule her, and courage, trust, and perhaps even friendship could flourish. And as they prepared to descend from the rooftop and continue their journey, Lyra's heart felt lighter, stronger, and ready to face whatever came next. With the human by her side, the city stretched below them, glowing faintly in the early morning light. Lyra stood beside the human on the rooftop, her wrists free, her chains gone, and for the first time in years she felt something she had thought lost forever: hope. The market's chaos was far below, and the shouts of those who had hunted her faded into distant echoes. She could finally breathe. You really saved me," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. He shook his head, a faint smile on his face. "I didn't do anything extraordinary. I just did what anyone should do." Lyra studied him carefully. His clothes were simple, his appearance unassuming. But she saw the truth in his actions: courage, patience, and kindness beyond measure. No weapon, no cunning, no strength of body alone had freed her. He had freed her because he had heart, because he had humanity. I've seen cruelty, betrayal, and fear my whole life, she admitted quietly. I never thought anyone would care, but you prove me wrong. He reached out and lightly touched her shoulder, a gentle gesture, not claiming, not controlling, just offering comfort. You matter, Lyra, he said. Not as a prize, not as an object, but as someone alive, someone worth protecting. I saw you, and I couldn't look away. Tears welled in her eyes, and she blinked rapidly to hold them back. She had been seen so little in her life, treated so poorly, and yet here was someone who had risked himself, defied the market, and the expectations of his own species, just for her. She realized that true strength was not in chains or weapons or dominance. It was in courage, in care, and in choice. They began to move, carefully descending the fire escape at the side of the building. Each step was deliberate, cautious, but confident. Lyra's legs trembled slightly, both from exhaustion and the unfamiliar thrill of freedom. She glanced at him, and he offered her a reassuring nod. Together they navigated the city's maze-like streets, slipping through alleys, avoiding any who might recognize her, until the market became a distant memory. Once they were far enough, Lyra stopped and turned to him, her eyes wide with gratitude and awe. You're different from everyone I've ever met, she said softly. Humans, I thought you were weak. I thought you would run or hide or ignore me, but you're incredible. He chuckled quietly, shaking his head. I'm just one human, Lyra. I can't speak for the rest of my kind. But I do know this. Even the smallest act of courage can make a difference. You've survived because you didn't give up. And I helped because I believe that every life is worth saving. She looked at the horizon, the first rays of sunlight spilling over the city, painting the buildings gold. She had never felt anything like this, freedom, yes, but also hope, trust, and the beginning of something new. The chains that had bound her wrists and her life were gone, replaced by something stronger. The knowledge that she could stand beside someone who believed in her, someone willing to fight for her, and that she could fight too. For the first time, Lyra imagined a future that wasn't defined by fear or captivity. She imagined a life where she could speak, move, and exist freely. And beside her, a human had shown her that the universe could hold more than cruelty. It could hold courage, care, and even love. Where do we go now? She asked softly, her voice full of wonder. Anywhere you want, he replied simply. Somewhere safe. Somewhere we can start over, together. Lyra smiled, tears slipping freely now. She had been chained, hunted, and treated as less than life itself. Yet here she stood, free, alive, and with someone who saw her as more than a prize. Her heart swelled with gratitude and a fierce, growing strength, and as they walked away from the city, hand in hand, Lyra realized the truth that had taken her so long to learn. Humans, small and fragile to many, could be the strongest force in the galaxy, not because of weapons or dominance, but because of courage, heart, and the choice to do what is right, even when no one else would. The sun rose higher, casting light over a world that was suddenly brighter, bigger, and full of possibilities. For the first time, Lyra felt it deep in her bones, freedom, hope, and the extraordinary power of humanity. And together they disappeared into the horizon, ready to face whatever the universe had in store, side by side, unbroken and unstoppable.